We are now at our final topic, the road ahead, securing a global AI ecosystem and standards, which will be moderated by Professor Ray Walsh. Ray, over to you.
Thanks very much, Paul. Yes, so you're welcome, and I will be introducing the speakers in this particular session. My name, as Paul said, is Ray Walsh. I'm the director of the EU Observatory for ICT Standards and convener of the UOS Foresight Committee. So we look at upcoming and future challenges in standardization within the European context. I'm also ISO and AI and data standards developer, and the National Coordinator for the Gaia X Hub in Ireland. And it's my great pleasure with this final panel discussion to focus on the latest developments in the standards for AI, as well as the drivers for future work in AI security and privacy standards. The invited experts will share insights on data governance, the challenges of standardization, and how to realize secure international data spaces. So, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our esteemed guests, Dr. George Sharkov. And George is the co-chair of Securing Artificial Intelligence. And George is also the ETSI ISG of Securing Artificial Intelligence. And George is also the director of ESI Centre Eastern Europe, which is the Regional Excellence Centre of European Software Institute in Sofia. Professor Marcus Helford. And Marcus is the Empower Data Governance National Research Centre of Ireland director. And Marcus is also the director of the Innovation Value Institute. And finally, Loretta Telia. And Loretta is co-founder of OpenSynBio.org, which is a cloud and AI ecosystem for synthetic biology, and co-founder of FabricX. And Loretta is also the member of the European AI Alliance. So what will happen in this session is, first of all, each of us will introduce an insight, I suppose, into the AI data and security landscape from our perspectives. And first to take the stage is George Sharkov. And George is going to talk about securing artificial intelligence from an ETSI ISG perspective. Over to you, George.
Thank you. Good evening, and deeply regret that I could not join you there on the panel. Hopefully next year other things will look better. Thank you. And happy to be on the panel with such competent colleagues. The point of artificial intelligence, securing artificial intelligence landscape in relation to the standards, this is a complex area. And to face the challenges of the new field of especially the threat vulnerabilities and the need to secure AI for future applications, at ETSI Industry Specification Group, which is a kind of a lightweight technical committee, let me explain it like that, was established in September 2019, and there is a significant overlap of the core group members with the technical committee cyber at ETSI, which is quite logical, having in mind the subject, and the three aspects that are in the roadmap of specification group activities in the area of standards domain. They're like the main goal is the direction of securing AI, so to protect the AI and study vulnerabilities and so on. And the second area is where AI is a problem. This means where AI is. Can you go back to the first slide? Sorry. Yeah. Thank you. Bottom right. And where AI is used by adversaries and the malicious use of AI, while we have to study, because we have to efficiently defend against that. And the third one is the use of AI to empower, to enhance the security or the defense tools and techniques to protect both against conventional and AI-empowered attacks. So these are the three areas. Of course, in order to start with that, the next slide, please. We have to see what the landscape is, and starting with the securing AI to see where the vulnerabilities, the threats, and how to assess the risks of AI being compromised. Certainly, I should make one note here that following the most popular or the trends of using AI right now in industry and society, those are all areas of machine learning, but we are looking beyond that, different types of machine learning, but we are looking also for the more powerful and the reasoning techniques that have been used some time ago and that will come after machine learning, let's call it like that. So at the moment we look at the threat landscape for the machine learning techniques. However, we do not limit to that. So the working items that we are focusing on and that we have, we are currently developing intensively, those are, is the first specification, actually a lightweight standard, security testing of AI. So this sets the comprehensive methodology of testing AI, what should be tested against all these aspects that we are discussing. Explicability and transparency. So we rename a little bit explainable AI to face this technically robust AI and to face the requirements coming from the ethics guidelines and the other trustworthiness of AI. With this field of explicability and also the transparency to address these two areas. Again, focusing mainly on machine learning techniques and the privacy aspects of AI machine learning. That has been addressed already. It's not only related about to data that are being used for training, but also that are used in operation by AI systems. Artificial intelligence computing platform security framework. This is also addressing the platforms that are, let's say, based on the modern architectures and computational powers like high performance computing and so on, and also the vulnerabilities and threats that are coming from there. And last but not least, this is these are active topics or the reports in progress. Only one is the trend is from these working reports and combining them to come to a specification, which is the basis for a standard. And what we have published so far, of course, this is what we normally start with, the securing AI problem statement. This is the threat landscape coming and the goals that we put in our future work in a standardization area. The threat ontology, the threat landscape, data supply chain report as well. That has been all the threats that come from the data being used for in various aspects in a supply. And mitigation strategy report and role of hardware in securing AI. And the future work that we do plan and we are discussing in relation to the AI Act and the risk-based approach, and also to support the call for standardization, interoperability. This is work related to data security and integrity, the training data, quality, quantity, confidentiality, labeling, and so on, ethics and misuse, although this is not a technical issue, but we understand that this should be addressed, at least in the report work, the bias and unintended consequences as well, the data process, machine learning lifecycle, and it was mentioned already, AI federation or AI to AI communication, transfer learning, knowledge bases, and so on, knowledge sharing, which would need standardization as well, and retraining of systems. So the point also is that we do understand that AI is not just a technology. It is changing the process, changing the business models, and the requirements and the standards will need to address not only the technology, not only the data, but they will need the entire ecosystem. Similar, I will make analogy with the standards that we use in high-level security requirements for system security systems or cyber security systems, and a standard which is commonly known as a common criteria that we do certify or do test the entire ecosystem, which simply means the technology or the technique, the data information systems, the algorithmic part, but also the organizational part and the processes. And in addition to the work, because this group apparently is focused on the securing AI, this is one aspect of the standard work in AI, but we do have other aspects of AI, and typically to the ETSI profile, where we have more than, I should mention, more than 30 years of experience and 48,000 standards published so far, more than 100 working groups in different formats, technical committees with subgroups or industry specification groups, projects as well. And I should mention some other divisions or some other groups that are engaged with different aspects of AI, specific sectoral or technology related, application area related. This is the 3GPP project that ETSI is participating widely, and there are two committees involved in that. So generally, I would say this is AI for optimization of ICT networks. So we have a couple of other specification groups like the experiential network intelligence group, multi-access edge computing, and so on. So we do have ethical requirements and AAUs, which is the e-health project that we're involved in the group inside the, so thanks to our colleague Lindsay Frost from the European Observatory, we also have this color and nice mapping and slide. And reliability through, oh, sorry, I see that you haven't switched the slide. Can you put the last slide, please? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I don't know if it is visible enough, maybe you should enlarge it, but anyway, for the audience to be able to see it. And then we have definitely, in addition to our industry specification group, AI-related security issues that are being escalated or addressed in our, let's say, mother committee, a technical committee, cyber, where we do expect also some of the specifications to be transferred on the top. And this is important to underline here, maybe that is part of the discussion later on, that AI systems are still IT, software, algorithmic systems, but they're quite specific. So when we speak about cybersecurity or securing these type of systems or ecosystems, we need to apply all the requirements or all the security measures and the risk to assess all the risks that are applicable for traditional ICT systems, if I can name it like that. But on the top of that, we have AI-specific threats, vulnerabilities, risks that we need to address. And when we speak about the standards and certifications, and this is in the context of implementation of AI Act, we do think that this should be in tight collaboration or synchronization with the implementation of Cybersecurity Act, where we do have this system of cybersecurity certification schemes, and then we have the competent bodies and the infrastructure around Europe with accredited laboratories, testing centers, and so on, testing methods. So our view is that when we speak about the testing and certifying AI applications, we need to join that scheme or this type of activities, and not to be like a separate or yet another burden of certification standards and accreditation that are needed. And then, of course, we have a couple of other groups that are specifically dedicated to testing technologies or to smart devices like smart M2M, or we have IoT related and a lot of data that are related and used by that, autonomic management and control intelligence for self-managed, fixed and mobile integrated networks and so on. So with this, I will stop. So we have a lot of additional bodies which are domain or sectoral specific that address AI, other aspects of AI, not only about the security of AI. And maybe some of them are much more advanced in terms of practical applicability, especially talking about the IoT, autonomous devices, and network management, optimized network management. Thank you for the moment, and open for the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George. That was a very broad and very detailed sort of landscape of some of the standardization challenges that are necessary within the AI ecosystem. And it sort of leads me into my own introduction here. So I'm going to be up next. It's me that's going to just introduce some topics as well in relation to ICT standardization from the European Observatory for ICT Standards perspective. So what I'll do is I'll introduce what the Stand ICT project is doing, and if we can get those slides put up as well. So this is the information that I will use as a sort of a backdrop, and these slides have been made available because they're quite detailed. So it's just to give a flavour of some of the effort and some of the work that the European Commission is putting in supporting standards engagement at a European level. And this project, Stand ICT, is, as I said, is a Horizon 2020 funded project, and it is to support European expert engagement in international standardization and European standardization. So you would have had lots of people like George and other ESO members in CENELEC or ISO, IEEE, etc., standards experts would apply to our project looking for grants to support their work. And the Commission has granted us €4 million. 3 million of that we just give straight back out to the community, to the best proposals we receive, and we hope to expand the engagement and the influence of European experts in standardization by virtue of doing that. The award winners are called fellows, and the fellows are embedded in TCs, so technical committees, and SCs, so standard subcommittees, working groups, ad hoc groups, right across the board. And you can see from the slides there on the bottom left-hand corner, you can see some of the areas that are supported by the fund, I suppose, that's provided by Horizon 2020, European Commission framework program. And the obvious ones are there. So areas like what George is just talking about, like in terms of cybersecurity and specifically related to AI, but you also have the data technology, as well as cybersecurity. You have blockchain, you have digital twin, Internet of Things, etc. And you can see it also that it's very hard to make out on the graph at the bottom, but there's quite a good split between the various SDOs and ESOs that are supported by this grant system, by this grant platform. You can see that ISO is a big winner there. That was around the time that the open call came for blockchain, and because TC 307 is an ISO committee, there was a lot of applications at that time, so ISO were well supported. But also ETSI, CENELEC, well represented there, and the JTC1 committees as well of ISO and IEC. Another part of the platform that we have under the European Observatory for ICT Standards is the repository. And we store standards there. So we document standards by our technical working groups. We have lots of technical working groups which are manned by various experts. Lindsay Frost, as George has mentioned earlier, Lindsay is the chair of the technical working group on AI for the EUOS, the European Observatory for ICT Standards. And Lindsay has already published, in conjunction with the members of TWG AI, a landscape report for the European Commission. So this is one of the outputs from the technical working groups of the EUOS. And there are other ones that are in the pipeline, Digital Twin and Smart Cities. Smart Cities is just about to be published, and Digital Twin is well underway as well. And there are others in terms of IoT and cybersecurity and blockchain, etc., which are landscape reports that are ongoing. So we hope to make those documents, and we'll make those documents freely available as reference documents for the ecosystem and also for the community. And then there's a snapshot there on the bottom middle part of this slide, which shows some of the chairs of the technical working groups. Lindsay on the top left-hand side there, but you can see Brian McAuliffe and Fiona Delaney and Matthias Pox and various other leaders who are involved in the technical working groups within the European Observatory. And as we roll out more technical working groups, we'll be expanding our remit. Each technical working group will do a landscape report and then a gap analysis for future standards and provide that back to the public. So that's just to set the scene from going from the ETSI standards that George has laid out and the cybersecurity aspect and AI security aspect of his work. And then this is sort of funding through the European Observatory to support some of that engagement as well. So that's me. Next up is Professor Marcus Helford. And Marcus is the director of the Empower Data Governance Research Hub in Ireland. It's a multi-university, multi-centre hub of about 1,000 researchers, access to 1,000 researchers. And Marcus is also director of the Innovation Value Institute. So Marcus, I'm going to pass over to you and just bring up your slides so that you can introduce the work that's going on in the Empower Data Governance Centre.
Thanks, Ray, for the kind introduction, and also welcome from my side. Unfortunately, also virtual, but hopefully next year we have all the physical face-to-face meetings again and the discussions around this. So yeah, as Ray said, so I'm the director of a newly established research program on data governance. Funded by Science Foundation Ireland and in collaboration with 4 leading research centers in Ireland, LERO, ADAPT, Future Neuro, and Insight. And I think we brought together an exciting research program as an industry academic collaboration. And we have access to about 1,000 researchers, experts around this with these 4 centers. So a large-scale initiatives around data governance to make these data spaces and that data ecosystem as a trustworthy, as a standardized way of data sharing in the European Union around this. And I don't know if you see the slides now. Yes, so the slides which have 5 pillars, 5 streams on research, and I'm quite excited about that it's really multidisciplinary. So in the center, we have, for example, technologies, AI, high-performance computing technologies, digital technologies, to, for example, ensuring the privacy-preserving technologies. I think there's a lot of possibilities around this to apply technologies, to apply new algorithms around, and to do that on scale, basically. So to have data privacy on scale. Then we're moving on to data ecosystems, business models. So I think that new data ecosystem, data sharing offers a lot of opportunities for small, but also large companies, different organizations to monetize, to share, to build business models, to innovate around this. So that's all the streams around data ecosystems. We're also looking at regulation, standardization, regulatory sandboxes are an important aspect around it. So to test and see the mix between the flexibility on the one side to allow innovation, but on the other side, how far regulation should go and to see really the impact of regulation and innovation in that data ecosystem. Then a stream where also Professor Ray Walsh works and leads that on governance and standards, where we look at frameworks also from an organizational point of view, processes, frameworks, data quality aspects around this. So to standardize data governance in that way to make it comparable, but also replicable and in the standards way. And then the 5th stream is centered around people-centric, ethics by design, privacy by design. So all the wider aspects what data governance requires and involving citizens around this. And as you see, the 5 streams from technology to ecosystems to people-centric design is truly multidisciplinary. And we're working on various details. So what you see on the slide are the detailed tasks. I won't go into detail at this stage. We might have some aspects in the discussion. But yes, so I think it's an exciting opportunity. If you're interested in that, there's the webpage on the website as well. We're working with small companies together, but also with large companies. So building a really, truly ecosystem, a community around data governance to bring that to the next step.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Marcus. and it brings that ecosystem together, like where George talking from a standards perspective and from the standards development organization perspective from a European body, and then with Empower, like a research center which has multifaceted arms to its bow and crossing multiple disciplinary areas. It starts to tie together like some of the challenges that are brought about by this fast evolving, digital single market, but these digital technologies which are used to support it. And the next part would be try and maybe look at a sectoral approach. And now it's my pleasure to introduce next to the stage, which is Loretta Tuilia, and she's co-founder of the OpenSyn Biocomputing Foundation, which is a cloud and AI ecosystem for synthetic biology. And she's also co-founder of FabricX, and Loretta is a member of the European AI Alliance. So Loretta is going to talk a little bit about the OpenSyn Bio Computing Foundation. Over to you, Loretta.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this introduction, Ray. So I think what I would like to bounce in here is the need for regulatory sandbox. Across today's discussion, I think one of the things that came again and again is the need to actually offer the possibility for SMEs, but more widely to the ecosystem to be able to develop. And I think that so far, the entire ecosystem has come together to really bring that set of tools that the ecosystem actually dearly need. When I think about ISO, Sensenelec, Etsy, and through research organization initiatives such as Empower, I really feel that we are at the stage where we are able to really give to the different data spaces the ability to really build on top of this regulation to now move on and apply that in a very industrial and vertical context. So before I just translate from that need for regulatory sandbox to the vertical that I want to talk to you about, which is synthetic biology, I will make here the transition from digital health. We are all been concerned over the past year and a half now with the need to actually share more data in the hope that this will help us fight against the virus, but also in the future develop new technologies. And I think at the Digital Europe Foundation, we have found that now the Digital Europe Council is actually featuring and nurturing this kind of initiative at the European level. And so switching from health to actually synthetic biology, we can easily understand the transition, because synthetic biology in essence is just the ability to engineer life. So instead of treating the health issue and challenges that we are facing as something to which we will just react naturally, I think synthetic biology really offers the ability to engineer life and design actually drugs that will allow us not only to just treat diseases, but really proactively bring a benefit, such as fighting actively against aging, for example. And so overall, I think one of the fields such as synthetic biology and what it represents is actually a tremendous market opportunity for Europe to position itself in this very advancing and important field, but also, generally speaking, to be positioning itself as a strong competitor. We have all heard about cloud computing, the need for Europe to position itself and fight for its digital sovereignty in cloud computing. It has been true also for AI, and the standards have been there to allow us to actually protect our values and develop a framework that will actually be respectful of these values. But I think here with verticals such as synthetic biology, we really find here that we can not only be reactive, but we can actually be a strong competitor. Synthetic biology is actually one of the fields where Europe is not actually laggard, but actually Europe is actually leading actors. We actually have the share of the lion when it comes in terms of patents, even faced to the US or China. And we have a tremendous amount of scientific knowledge and that we can build on. And so the possibility is really very tremendous for us. When we're talking about synthetic biology, we are here talking about a market which which is estimated by McKinsey reports up to 6 trillion actually euro by 2025. And so what can actually synthetic biology bring to us in a layman's term that any one of us can actually relate to? And for that, I will pick the example of in silico medicine, which is the first actually AI company that has designed entirely, the first drug that has been entirely designed by AI, and which is entering now human trial. So this is the first human trial in human history for a drug that has been entirely designed through assisted computing systems such as AI. And what that means is if what in silico medicine is actually doing right now for fibrosis can be done for future disease, but also not only diseases, but also for more than just medical application, but also in every vertical, such as food and agriculture, but also consumer products, and also fighting against climate changes. And so Europe really has, through its ecosystem, the ability to go above and beyond here, but we need for that to actually care about this ecosystem. And this is where OpenSymbio actually fits naturally into that standard and regulation ecosystem, considering that we are actually working deeply with the open source governance actually actors such as Eclipse Foundation, for example, to really make sure that we are tapping into that governance expertise to be able to offer through our platform the open source governance that the ecosystem needs to be able to approach actually developing tools such as AI tool towards building better actually system in synthetic biology. But we are also taking the benefit of what is being done by actually actors such as ISO or ETSI into developing this framework that we so dearly need to make sure that whatever data will be exchanged in a very trustworthy and privacy-preserving way. So I really think that it offers for us actually a strong market of opportunities. If I were actually linking back to a very famous actually key player, which is Eric Schmidt. Eric Schmidt commented in November 2019 during the Symbio Beta conference that one of the key actually elements right now in the development of synthetic biology is the need for open source. And at OpenSymbio Beta, we really endorse and support that strong need for open source development, and we want to embed that into that regulatory framework. And we really think that right now is actually the perfect timing to do it. So really happy to talk more about it, but definitely looking forward to the development of this industry. To give you a final note, our ecosystem is actually thriving. Right now, the latest actually raise, very important raise. In France, we can think about Tree Frog, a company that has just raised 64 million, and we can think also about Guinness Script, which has just raised actually in October 2021, just shy of 142 million. So this makes of this company the kind of company that we were talking about today, hyper large actual companies on top of which we can really build and develop our ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Loretta, for that. It's fascinating. It ties together like the vertical aspect of the AI ecosystem as well. And we've also already mentioned with George and the standards, and with Marcus on the data governance aspect of this, of the controlling of the digital ecosystems. And that brings us to the question and answer session now, which is the panel session. We're going to just start with you, George, actually, just to bring it back to you, because we've talked about sort of innovation and there's an innovation cycle or life cycle, I suppose, from research to globalization effectively. And people talk about regulation versus innovation. Like, do regulation and innovation go hand in hand? And what way what's your view? What's the ETSI view on that, George?
Well, first of all, we should be quite aware where the proper place of the standards is, because you have let's say in the global ecosystem, you have two views. So you have from the research and innovation, the ideas that this is the so-called push side, that bring innovation or new solutions to the market. And on the other hand, you have the market, or on the top side, you have this, the pull side, let's call it like that. And the famous S-curve that shows this push and pull collaboration in the middle somewhere, it's a kind of tipping point that you start depending on a new technology. So the market or the society, the pull side is stronger than the push side. And then normally, so this is the typical reason why we have cybersecurity standards, but unfortunately we have them a little bit quite late. 30 years after we have the massive penetration of IT in general. So the point is somewhere in the middle, the standards would have two roles. So on one hand is that the new ideas or new research or the innovations, to be able to quickly enter the market, they need to interoperate or they need to collaborate with the other systems. So this is where the standards stand from the bottom-up side. On the other hand, the market needs to be ensured that whatever innovations that are given, first of all, they are compatible with the others, the other digital ecosystem in a way to call it. And then the second thing is that you have certain requirements, regulations for trustworthiness, technical robustness, security, and so on that are met. So therefore, the standards, they have on one hand, they have a role as an enabler or market competitiveness, so that the new research and innovation, to the contrary of the commonly expected that this is bureaucracy and that limits the research and innovation. No. If you have the standards that are adapted to the new technologies really and applicable to the new technologies, then they will help this research and innovation. On the other hand, they will help also the market, because if you have requirements, and this the mapping between the regulation and the technical requirements and the technical organizational requirements that are explained in standards, and then you have a proper certification framework as well for that, then you ensure that the market side is will receive these innovative products or the new product services that are given will receive trustworthy solutions. So definitely, if you consider regulations as barriers or like putting limits or red lines that you need to cross, you don't need to cross, and it was part of the large discussion we had at the European Committee, the high-level expert group on AI that was 4 years ago already established, and we published these ethics guidelines on trustworthy AI, where you have to do this balance between the regulation, the legal part, and then you have the ethical part, the ethics, and then you have the technical robustness part. And having this balance will ensure or will enable innovations or stimulate the innovations rather than limit them. But if you put a lot of red lines, or if you misuse in a way the human-centric approach or human oversight and so on, that sometimes is not applicable, or if you put regulations that are or requirements that are technically not feasible at all, or they're not adapted to the technology and the business process related. This is we are talking here not about algorithms only, but we talk about the data and the specific feature of the AI system, that they are self-learning and self-adapting systems, so they are self-evolving. With all the issues with the repeatability, transparency, and so on, that need to ensure this trustworthiness.
Yes. Absolutely, and I think that's a very important point, that the innovation is fluid, and that standardization, their standards are living documents. They co-evolve with the technology. They don't just appear and disappear at 2, 3, 4 year periods. So the evolution of the technology can be supported by engaging early with standardization. It gives you that interoperability at a global scale, and it's important, and I'm going to talk to Marcus about this in relation to the explosion, because like trying to get your head around the amount of data that's out there at the moment. Like they say that data is the oxygen that's fueling this digital transformation. And data governance is becoming more and more important, and where Empower comes into its own then, Marcus, like, is trying to put structure, like the standard structure and being a foundation and a bedrock, for regulation and certification and legislation. Then the governance is also required, for the data, these massive data ecosystems and data sharing platforms, which are coming to be deployed worldwide now. What's your take on that?
Yeah, and particularly, I think the merging between digital transformation research, what we do, for example, at the Innovation Valley Institute at Maynooth University, and data governance with the Empower program, they're merging together. So, and I think that scale of data is massive. And I think an important aspect on this is actually to learn from best practices, putting that body of knowledge together, what the good data governance looks like, what technology, what processes, what standardization, how we can combine that to make really the value out of that data and to make that data ecosystem in that trustworthy, responsible world possible. And I think the way is really to standardize, and that leads then also to automated workflows to support on automating data governance. So we're talking about augmented data governance, data fabric. So to really enable the technical interoperability in a more automated way, where we can monitor data flows, where we can also, for example, check compliance in an automated way and ensure privacy in a more automated way. So I think this is a key challenge. If we really want to scale it up to that opportunity what we have, we need to think about how to combine and standardize workflows, practices, processes, and that allows them to automate and to support that. So to basically reduce the burden of data governance in that way, to support that, and by this we really create true value out of data. And I think this is the key challenge around this in that world, what we describe trustworthy data, data governance, trustworthy AI, and so on.
Yeah, thank you. I will tend to agree with that, basically because if you think about it from a vertical perspective, it is true for synthetic biology, but it's actually true for any vertical. Synthetic biologists are not expert in data, and they are not looking forward to become necessarily actually computer scientists or expert in data. What they need are actually off-the-shelf, standardized actually framework that they can work with. And so in that environment, I think what Berana actually said earlier is actually very true. Big data ethics actually stem out of small product decisions. And so it is by working at the very low level with any decision that each one of us are going to make when we're actually integrating this technology and working on data, that we're going to be able to see and make that connection with the regulation and the framework that has been developed. So it's very important to make that kind of connection through ecosystem engagement, whether it is directly through initiative run by the Commission or through other type of organizations such as OpenSymbio.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. It gives an example there of the quantity of data that's actually required to do the likes of synthetic biology. It's mind-boggling, and the systems that are required to support that have to involve large-scale data sharing platforms. And Loretta mentioned earlier about open source and the developments that's happening in relation to these data sharing platforms. And one of the things that we need to be cognizant of all the time is the quality of the data. And I'm going to go back to you, George, first on this, because we constantly hearing this garbage in, garbage out in terms of we have these massive frameworks and massive systems like for processing large-scale data. But quality of data is important, George.
Yes, that's one part of the work and related to AI, especially with AI. Of course, the quality of data is important for any IT systems. However, here we have this specific part that the data become actually part of the knowledge base. So the training data in whatever learning we have supervised or machine or reinforced learning and deep learning, whatever. We do have the quality of data will change the behavior, the decisions of the system or the advices of the systems. It's not just about the calculation. So practically in this case, the data will change the way the system works. And that is extremely important because and this brings additional criteria about the data bias and so on. Well, we know these very sophisticated attacks towards machine learning algorithms that with a little changes, especially the self-learning or deep learning technologies, that with the small changes every day of some parameters, talking about industrial systems, SCADA or whatever systems, then you bring the system into a new, totally new set or the new normal, let's call it like that, that will not be noticed as alert in a way. So this is just one example. Of course, here we talk also about the data privacy, because this is part of the quality of data, especially in health area, that is considered as higher risk area. And here we should come also to the approach of AI Act and the white paper, the European approach, the risk-based approach. Remember that has been discussed in the previous sessions that it's not about the algorithm, not even about data. It is about the use of the system. So this quality of data will be important for the users of the system. So how you use what you ask and so on, because this way you not only receive your answer to the question or the advice you need from the system or the response of the system, but also you change the behavior of the system. And having in mind that tomorrow, well, it's not yet reality, but tomorrow we will start exchanging these knowledge bases between the different machine learning platforms that will affect the other system behavior. So that's why we do have specific standards on the data quality that are specific for AI and machine learning, both in the preparation, training phase and the use phase.
Absolutely, George. And actually, you've raised another point there, like as you mentioned, trust and the importance of trust in these systems. And like we all want to be able to share our data and be able to, I suppose, use the system so that we get recommended or what's the next thing that we want to buy, or what's the next decision that needs to be made if it's an automated decision-making process. And we need to trust these systems. And there's a trade-off then between trust and utility, So and I'm sure everybody would want to get in on that, because if you want to be totally private, so privacy and utility rather. So from a trustworthy point of view, if you want to be totally private, then you get no utility out of your data, by sharing it with the data platforms. But if you're totally open, then you don't have any privacy. And it gives us all of these research areas that like the Marcus, that you'd have to take on in terms of empower, in terms of looking at compliance by design and conformity of assessment, and trying to build in these trustworthy mechanisms into the platforms that are being developed. Do you want to pick that one up, Marcus?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're talking about a trustworthy environment, so we need to combine the system perspective. So we need to have systems which we trust and which are developed in that way, in that open way that we understand. And on the other side, we need to combine that with the data and basically using data in that trustworthy, in that compliance way. And I would argue even that we maybe need to look at less data hungry algorithms, so that we actually provide these systems, recommender systems, that way where we actually can use data in less data maybe, and basically using that around this, so that we basically really get to that trust level that users can at least understand what happens with the data. So if we're talking about informed consent, the user-centric perspective, so we need to build that, and we need to consider all the different aspects, and maybe a little bit less data hungry algorithms might be also the possibility. At the same time, we're talking about data governance at scale.
Yeah, absolutely, Marcus. And I think when you mention trust and privacy in that context, I think there isn't probably a better exemplar or vertical than what Loretta's area, like in terms of the health. If you look at trust and privacy from a health perspective, then that brings a whole new focus on the types of algorithms we should be trying to employ, to maintain that that trustworthiness within the systems. And maybe Loretta, you'd pick that up, like, because you have the privacy enhancing technologies that can be applied, or privacy preserving technologies in this instance, like to try and maintain those systems in a trustworthy fashion.
Yeah, I think trust and trustworthiness has been from the beginning one of the core issue, and at the same time a requirement when we have talked about health. And so what we can be really proud of is that across Europe right now we really see that dynamic where on a per country member state basis we can see now the emergence of health data hubs. We can think of the HDR UK, we can think of the health data hub in France and in Germany. Everywhere across Europe we can really see that happening. And so with this in mind, what these hubs are actually doing is actually act as a government actually point of reference that gives to the end user, to the patient, the securities and on the fact that we can really believe that this system will be submitted to a very strong, I would say, a regulation analysis to make sure that whatever actually data is actually coming from the hospital, whether the data is actually coming from research centers, whether they are directly coming from the patient, because we need to keep in mind now that wearable technologies allow for health information to come directly from the patient in itself. And so wherever these data are actually coming through entities such as health data hubs that allow for, of course, one point of concentration, and we can argue that it could also be a single point of failure from a technological perspective, but it's a good way to actually start applying the governance, start actually assessing the risk, start analyzing the impact that data sharing can have at this scale before we actually move further on and start actually sharing across countries and across organizations. And that was one of the points that was brought earlier. We need actually to start data sharing. And for that, we do have now the technologies in place without throwing in the big words. George actually mentioned earlier the need and the developments of technologies such as federated learning behind this easy idea of federation of services, and that is something that we actually have been growing familiar with through initiatives such as GaiaX. So we really see that there is this huge movement forward into trying to make that technically possible, but also from the user perspective, also something that on which we regain control and onto which we actually make sure that they are actually not only preserving from the technological perspective, but also preserving from a value perspective.
Thanks very much, Loretta. Just we're conscious that we have about 5 minutes left, so but it's exciting times ahead. Lots of things happening in this space. Data sharing environments, data sharing platforms, GaiaX, a system going online and in Europe. So lots of things that are work that has to be done, I suppose, from a trust, from an ethics, from a privacy perspective. And I think what I'd like to ask you now, just as each of you, starting with George, and to go around on the panelists to say, well, what are you excited about, like in terms of what's coming down the track? In relation to standardization, the research in Empower, for example, in terms of some of the projects that are upcoming, and the possibilities with securing the platforms for synthetic biology and the development, the research and development environments. So, George, your takeaway, sort of inspiring comment at the end of our session.
Maybe I should start with this, we should always remember what the three aspects of the AI Act cover. So one thing is we need to secure the AI, to ensure the proper use of AI on the consumer side. So this is in Europe, European Union applicable, but I think it's raising the bar for the global standardization. The second thing is for all the developers or suppliers of these services that deliver the products and services inside Europe. However, the third aspect, which is regulated there as well, or intended to be regulated, those are services coming from the outside, or like advices or decisions coming from the outside, systems that are located outside, and data sets that are located outside that may use or could use some AI algorithms or techniques to give advice or to give a service to European citizens.
Thank you, George.
It means that somewhere in the supply chain we have AI, and I should remind that majority of SMEs will take AI as a service, and this service will be coming from the outside, so it needs to be standardized.
Thank you. And Marcus, your takeaway comment. So, what are you excited about in terms of the research agenda and what's coming down the track yourself?
Yeah, first I'm excited about the data topic. Like I think it's an exciting time where we can apply data in that way, which we just described, trustworthy. I'm also thinking like about the 5 streams of the Empower Data Governance program. So to bring it really multidisciplinary, bring it all together. And personally, I'm excited about to really apply technology to make augmented data governance, so to automate data governance to make it work for also small and medium-sized companies. So to make that really in an automated world, data governance world around this. So these are kind of the topics, multidisciplinary and augmented data governance.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Marcus. And lastly to you, Loretto, synthetic biology, it's all exciting as far as I can see, but what's your takeaway comment?
Yes, it is an exciting, actually, technology. I think I'm super excited about the potential of the field, obviously, but more importantly, I think I'm excited about our community and its ability actually to convert from regulation to delivering value. And so I'm very looking forward to see that actually shift happening.
Thank you very much, Loretto. Nothing left for me now to do but just to say thanks to each of our panelists. Thanks to George Sarko from ETSI, the co-chair of the ETSI ISG on securing AI, to Professor Marcus Helfert from the Empower Research Hub in Ireland, and from Loretto, who's the co-founder of OpenSynBio.